承諾，承諾，呢啲係海外募捐翻嚟嘅捐款，話叫佢哋嘅鼎力相助。對佢哋，我係有承諾㗎，我唔可以失信於人，我一定要親身踐落。
呢個唔係邊個嘅個人承諾，係我哋同盟會嘅承諾。
呢啲都係佢哋寫嘅。
呢個女人係邊個？
鐘漢，徐鐘漢，同盟會會員，我嘅同鄉。
哦，我係黃興。
廣州起義嘅秘密機關由鐘漢負責。咁啦，你同佢假扮夫妻，有利於掩護身份。
唔適合啊，唔適合啊。
有咩適唔適合啊？我一個女人都唔計較名字，你怕乜嘢啊？
前線赴死易，喚醒生者難，難嘅當然要交俾你。廣州起義將係對清王朝致命嘅一擊。
呢隻懷錶你攞住，起義嗰日，我哋一齊睇時間。
The year is 1911. Revolution is brewing all over the world, and the fetters of the old world are being cast off by force. And you are persona non grata in your own country, a rebel in China, unwanted and unwelcome in your own land. I am in front of Dr. Sun Yat-sen's house in Penang Island. Dr. Sun Yat-sen, during the Qing dynasty, the last years of the Qing dynasty, when it was fast losing its relevance and it had lost its meaning in the hearts of the Chinese people, was now persona non grata in China for his rebellion against the Qing government. The Qing dynasty had long gone past its expiry date, and it took the Opium War and a century of humiliation in order to wake the Chinese up from their, according to Marx, their hereditary stupidity and their Baijiu stupor. And when Dr. Sun waged the Xinhai rebellion, he was met with ferocious anti-rebellion, with ferocious backlash by the Qing government, which was itself a dying entity that was struggling to maintain its relevance. And behind me is the house of Dr. Sun Yat-sen during his time in Penang Island in Malaysia. Today I'm going to tell you about the history of the Penang Chinese community in the Xinhai Revolution, and how the Chinese community of Penang played a revolutionary role in the overthrow of the Chinese monarchy, ending 5,000 years of imperial tradition. So this house is actually where Dr. Sun spent a couple of months planning his Xinhai rebellion against the government of China, and it was thanks to the donations of the Malaysian Chinese community that Dr. Sun was successful in his rebellion. And today we're going to go in and check it out. So this house is well over 100 years old, and these are the very same tiles that Dr. Sun Yat-sen stepped on. And these are the types of furniture that Dr. Sun would have used during his stay in Penang Island, right? So Dr. Sun was actually spending a short while here because, well, basically he was, as I told you, he was persona non grata in China, and he was a very, very wanted man by the Qing dynasty, right? And he was, by all accounts, the most hated person by the Qing royal court. So this is the very same table that was used by Dr. Sun and his Malayan Chinese collaborators to plan the Xinhai rebellion. And in fact, these are the very same chairs in which Dr. Sun sat. And the same table was used in the film Road to Dawn, the Chinese film Road to Dawn. Now I'm just waiting for the curator to arrive so we can interview the curator and we can find out a little bit more about the Xinhai rebellion. The design of this house is basically a Peranakan design, right? It's got influences of both East and West. These are some examples of antique Peranakan furniture. Now, as I've told you, the Peranakans are the descendants of the Chinese sailors who came to the Malay Peninsula. Well, they married local Malay women, and that's a combination safe. The end result is people like me, basically. You see this? This is a bakul siah. This is a cake basket that's used to house wedding cakes when people get married, right? I have one back in my house that's over 100 years old as well. I don't know what this is, but I assume it's a burner. No. It's a stove. It's part of a stove that's used to cook stuff. What else we got? I'm not supposed to sit on this, but we have, let's see, a couple more bakul siahs over here, right? Now, all these are well over 100 years old. And what else? Well, we've got the typical Peranakan spiral staircase, which leads upstairs. Of course, we're not supposed to go upstairs. Please do not enter. Well, obviously, that place is private property, so we're not supposed to go in. And, well, yeah, we'll just wait for the curator. 8 or 9 times out of 10, worldly matters do not turn out as expected. Yes, I was expecting to get 10,000 followers on my YouTube channel. I'm still light years away from that. So long as one can be patient and persistent, putting up with hardships and complaints, one can achieve success. Yes, so I can keep putting up with my haters, because I'll just take Dr. Sun's advice and just bear his advice in mind and bear this hardship with patience. I feel like getting my channel off the ground is like the Xinhai revolution, trying again and again and again before I succeed. So let's take a look at the money that was donated by the overseas Chinese communities to Dr. Sun's cause. Okay, this was in 1911, so let's see. Negeri Sembilan's a state in Malaya. Penang is where we are right now. We're in Penang Island. Perak is a state just south of Penang. Singapore, 3,500. Selangor, 1,551. So the Malayan Chinese raised a total of $47,663, while the Chinese of Canada raised $63,600. The American Chinese, $14,000, and the French, Indo-China and Thailand Chinese and the Indonesian Chinese, they raised about 60,290. So this is the amount of money that was raised for Dr. Sun's rebellion, raised by the people he had galvanized in order to turn on the Qing dynasty, the overseas Chinese who had turned on the Qing dynasty. And these are all the uprisings, the 10 uprisings that Dr. Sun took in order to achieve his dream of a free and egalitarian China, right? The first uprising took place even before the 20th century. It took place in 1895, shortly after the first Sino-Japanese War, right? And all the way until the 10th and final uprising, which took place just after Dr. Sun's stint in Malaya, right? It took a total of 16 years for him to achieve his dream of the liberation of the Chinese people. So if you think that, that the world is not progressing fast enough and you feel that you're not making a difference, perhaps you just need a little bit more time, because Dr. Sun took many, many attempts in order to overthrow the Qing dynasty. And in our battle against the capitalist forces, we are going to take many, many attempts as well. But as Dr. Sun succeeded, so shall we. Well, that's a Taiwanese flag. But I don't think Dr. Sun would see it in the same way you guys see it, right? You guys think about the Taiwanese flag as a symbol of fascism and a symbol of reactionary forces, but that's not how Dr. Sun would have seen this flag, because back then, you see, the people of the nationalists were actually on good terms with the communists, right? Before the Chinese Civil War. And you have to remember that this was even before the Second World War, right? Dr. Sun could not have predicted the trajectory of the Second World War, right? In fact, Dr. Sun actually wanted a united Pan-Asian empire, right? And believe it or not, many of his comrades ended up becoming Japanese reactionary fascists later on, right? So that's a very, very ironic twist of events. But yeah, nevertheless, these are photographs of Dr. Sun, I think, and the Malayan Chinese community. Do you see him? Yes. And these are the people who supported Dr. Sun's rebellion. Some very, very important people, right? This is Ipoh in 1911, right? And these are the Chinese Malayans who supported Dr. Sun's rebellion. So let's read what he has to say. Let's read what the people who supported Dr. Sun, one of the guys who supported Dr. Sun, has to say. My dear daughters Yuan On, to receive and view. Tonight your father has already reached the fourth port of call, the Suez Canal. In another 6 days I will arrive in England. Please inform your two mothers. Now father would like both of you sisters to take a group photo together. After that, send 2 or 3 pieces to your brother's place in Honolulu. Ask him to forward them to me. One more thing. I have sent the scenery photographs of the second and third ports of call, several dozens of them in a package. I've asked Huang Jinqing to forward them. The rest I will show you later. Also, send my regards to your two mothers and everyone, and inform them I am safe. From your father. Now, I think these are Dr. Sun's daughters, if I'm not mistaken, right? Okay. Dr. Sun Yat-sen arrived in Penang in July 1910. His brother and his family joined him a few weeks later when Dr. Sun received news that his mother had passed away on 19th July 1910. The Penang supporters collected donations for her funeral. Dr. Sun left Penang in early December 1910, but his family stayed on until early 1912. While in Penang, the Sun family was supported by 11 members of the Penang Philomathic Union. Chen Xinzheng, Huang Jinqing, Wu Sherong, Xiu Mingcheng, 潘义仁、Xiu Kaiden, Ke Qingzhou, Xiong Yuhan, Chen Chuzhui, Xie Liqiao, and Lu Wenhui, who contributed $120 to $130 a month. That was quite a lot of money back then for their living expenses, including $20 in house rent. So these are the people who supported Dr. Sun, right? It was these people to whom he was grateful for his support in Malaya. These are some examples of old pottery that were used by Dr. Sun. These are broken, unfortunately. And here you have some examples of cooking pots that are used in the Peranakan culture. Yes, we don't use electric pots, electric stoves, pardon me. We use traditional fire, right? Traditional flame. And over here you have a traditional toilet as well. Is it a hole in the ground? Oh no, I don't want to see it. Anyway, yeah, these are some very interesting artifacts from the last century. You know, the traditional Peranakan mansion is designed in the same way that the house in Crazy Rich Asians is designed. Yeah, Crazy Rich Asians is about an old money Peranakan family, right? And it's so cool, you don't actually need an air conditioner in these types of houses. You really don't need an air conditioner. It's quite cool because of the ventilation that the roofing provides. You see these panels, these panels over here? These are how village houses in Malaysia are designed. And because they're designed for wind to blow in, you don't actually need an air conditioner to stay cool. You'll be quite cool and comfortable even without an air conditioner. You'll be quite impressed with the innovative minds of our predecessors, you know. If you knew what they were capable of creating with their relatively primitive level of technology compared to ours. So when Dr. Sun was waging his rebellion, China was, well, for lack of a better word, a very, very miserable place. Dr. Sun realized that, you know, the Chinese people were being held back from progressing by a rigid and close-minded Qing dynasty, right? As the mode of production shifted from feudalism to capitalism, the Qing dynasty, with its extremely conservative ways, refused to modernize, right? They refused to modernize, unlike Japan, and they basically maintained their old feudal structure, and they maintained their old backward feudal structure, which was at the great expense of the people. And so what happened was Dr. Sun traveled abroad, and he saw that while the world was progressing, China was stagnating, and no one in the government was doing anything about it, because the Qing government itself was rotten to the core, right? So they were a celestial monarchy, right? So they obviously could not be voted out. And so Dr. Sun, what did Dr. Sun do? Did he whine about it, cry about it, try to use democratic means to solve it? No. Revolutions are rarely, if ever, peaceful. So Dr. Sun gathered together an army, and he marched against the emperor several times, and he was met with crushing defeat again and again and again. You know, and it seemed that he was not going to succeed. After 8 or 9 times, he thought, perhaps he started to wonder and have doubts if he could ever succeed in transforming China out of backwardness and into the modern age. But the Qing dynasty was a cancer that had to go. And finally, just before the last rebellion, the last of his attempts, he came to the island of Penang, in Malaya with a burgeoning Chinese community, right? The Chinese who had come here as traders and had become an established merchant community, they provided Dr. Sun with the funding and the means in order to overthrow this cancer calling itself the Qing dynasty. And it was in this house itself, at this very table, where the last league of the Xinhai Rebellion from 1909 to 1911, the last league of the Xinhai Rebellion against the corrupt and tyrannical Qing dynasty was plotted between Dr. Sun and his Malayan Chinese supporters. Yes, it was right in this house where one of the most momentous occasions in the history of the 20th century took place. That is to say, the last league of the Xinhai Rebellion's plotting. And it was in this house that the fate of the Qing dynasty was sealed. So the revolutionaries always face scorn, they always face ridicule, and they always face humiliation and resistance by the powers that be. Just like Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win, right? I have no doubt that Dr. Sun also received scorn and ridicule by the supporters of the Qing dynasty, who viewed him as a silly person or a madman. The same way we face scorn and ridicule by the capitalist ruling class. And they say to us that capitalism has triumphed and there's nothing that you can do about it, right? Because capitalism is the superior system. Not realizing that capitalism is the next step after feudalism that Dr. Sun rebelled against. And now we are rebelling against the capitalists because capitalism has become an outmoded mode of production, an expired mode of production in the same way that feudalism in the 19th and early 20th centuries was becoming an expired mode of production. And whenever you rebel against the status quo, you're bound to face fierce resistance. You have no idea how fearful people were for Dr. Sun's life, right? Dr. Sun Yat-sen constantly had to watch his back for assassins, and that's why he had to leave this place, China, in order to come to Malaya, in order to escape his assassins. And just like the Qing dynasty believed that it was invincible, the reactionaries also believe that they are invincible. But like the Qing dynasty, which had an expiry date, they too have an expiry date. And we remind them of that. And believe me, just like the Qing dynasty fell, so will they. So I had a nice long chat with the curator of the museum, Mr. Alvin Wong, and Mr. Wong was a little uncomfortable to appear on camera, but he did give me permission to film. And I talked to him for about half an hour to answer these two questions. So I'll just tell you what he told me in these next few minutes. Basically, the first question was, why did Dr. Sun Yat-sen choose Penang, of all places, to plan the last stage of his rebellion? Right? Why Penang? Why not Singapore? Why not some other region of Malaya? Well, because Penang, you see, had the largest amount of enthusiastic supporters of Dr. Sun's cause. This might surprise you, but Penang at the time, in the time of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, was a majority Chinese place, right? And so, naturally, the Straits Chinese of Penang, as a result of Dr. Sun's galvanization to his cause, raised a whopping total of 8,000 Straits dollars. That, I can tell you, was the equivalent of a hundred over million dollars in today's money, right? That was the amount of enthusiasm that they had for his cause. And the second question I asked Mr. Wong was, Why did the Straits Chinese care so much about what was going on in the mainland, right? I mean, these people had been so far removed from China. They'd been away from China for almost a century, and some of them even more than a century, right? So what could possibly possess them to care so much about the Chinese rebellion, to overthrow the Qing dynasty, since they had moved miles and miles away? And the answer that Mr. Wong gave me was really that from their point of view, from the Chinese diaspora's point of view, in that time, well, their bodies were in Malaya, but their souls were in China. Because you have to remember, there was no Malaysia back then, right? Most people, as I've mentioned in the previous video, they viewed this region as a transitory point, right? Where they would just settle down for a couple of years until things settled down in China. So for many of these people, they still had an emotional investment in China. And even though they thought they might die here, they expected their bodies to be repatriated back to China. And, you know, the reason why they wanted to support Dr. Sun's rebellion against the Qing dynasty was because they believed that the only way the Chinese would be respected around the world was if there was a strong and independent and respectable China. And that's why they invested so much money, so much time, so much energy into this revolutionary fervor. People literally gave up their lives in order to support Dr. Sun's rebellion. People were martyred. People gave up every cent of their livelihood in order to ensure that China would be strong, stable, and prosperous. So from this we learn that no matter how far away in the world you are, whether you are in America, or Australia, or in Southeast Asia, I think it's normal to have some degree of concern for what goes on in the motherland, right? Even though I'm a Peranakan, I've been here for hundreds of years, it still fills my heart with joy when I see a strong, stable, and prosperous China. When I see my Chinese brethren doing well, it actually fills my heart with joy. And it makes me so happy to see that, you know, China is becoming a respectable, it has become a respectable global north country. And eventually the Chinese will rise back up again, right? And, you know, another thing we have to take away from this is that sometimes you feel that, you know, when you are waging rebellion against the ruling class, you feel as if you are throwing an egg against a rock, don't you? You get scorned, laughed at, ridiculed, bullied by the reactionaries, right? And it was no different in the time of Dr. Sun Yat-sen when he was standing up against the feudal reactionaries. He was laughed at, he was bullied, he was scorned. People literally tried to kill him, and there were times, I'm sure, when he felt that he might not succeed. There were times, I'm sure, when he had fallen into revolutionary despair. And it was only due to the support of his followers and the morale that they gave him and the revolutionary fervor that he had in his heart that this Xinhai rebellion took place, right? Now, Dr. Sun was by no means a communist, but when we look at the history of class struggle, he was still a progressive force because he turned the wheels in the history of class struggle. Just like Hang Jebat, he turned the wheels in the history of class struggle, paved the way for the Communist Party of China in order to lead China into the 21st century, right? By ending the 5,000-year-old monarchy of China, right? So, but sometimes you feel like you're throwing an egg against a rock, and you feel as if you're never going to succeed. But know that every revolutionary throughout history has always felt that way. Like, you know that Dr. Sun took 10 attempts in order to overthrow the Qing dynasty, right? And we are facing an even more ruthless force than the Qing dynasty. We are facing the American Empire, and we are facing the imperialist, capitalist hegemons, right? So, just like Dr. Sun, we are up against a gargantuan enemy, and we are up against a vicious, tyrannical, and ruthless enemy that wants to preserve its existence at all costs. But we must not give up our revolutionary fervor, because eventually, just like the Qing dynasty was overthrown, so too will the capitalist reactionaries who rule us. And when they are, we will finally get to pave the way for the next stage in the history of human development, the stage of socialism. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.